Good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to speak before all of you. I know we are big defenders of public libraries. And look, first of all, I'm the city controller right now. Have had the privilege of serving as city controller for almost 4 years now. Not an easy time to be chief financial officer of anything, let alone the city of New York. But I start every morning excited to have the opportunity to serve and help lead our city in the right direction. And one of the things that I've been very cognizant of is these claims that we don't have money for this or that. We've got plenty of money. This is a very wealthy city. It's just a question of how that wealth is being allocated or directed. And I think in many ways over the past administration, it's been directed into the wrong places in a way that actually has exacerbated the wealth gap in this city far greater than in many other parts of the country. And when you talk about the public libraries and other public assets, this is one of the issues that I've been very vociferous about. The fact that this administration wants to sell everything off. And it seems to be accelerating its efforts on its way out. It's the public libraries here in Brooklyn. You know, we kind of were successful in at least postponing one of them or delaying it. But nonetheless, we have to stay on top of it. The idea that, well, these libraries need additional funding and therefore we should sell off the public space to private developers who then claim to fund the construction or the reconstruction of the libraries. I think that's an argument that is not well grounded in actual results over the past recent years, because we have seen many examples of space being taken and then the communities coming to an agreement with the administration and or the developer, and then the promises not being fulfilled in the many years. Atlantic Yards would be one ginormous example of what's not happened. Hundreds of families being kicked out, of promises of affordable housing, of jobs, and 10 years later, we don't have a single apartment built, and we've got popcorn vending jobs. This is unbelievable in terms of the shortage of promises fulfilled. And this administration wants to now, after years of neglecting the upkeep of these important libraries, historical libraries, they now want to come in and save the day by selling off the buildings to private developers who supposedly promised to take care of the libraries. I mean, you know, there's a huge credibility gap if you ask me. And it's not just the libraries. It's also NYCHA properties, the New York City Housing Authority, playgrounds and public spaces, the community centers, the parking lots. They now, after 12 years of neglecting our 600,000 fellow New Yorkers who live in NYCHA buildings, they now want to have a plan to save the NYCHA buildings by selling off this public land and generating a pittance, $30 to $50 million of revenue for the sale of all those valuable properties. The numbers don't even add up. And beyond the numbers, again, there's a credibility gap. And then, you know, I think we've been successful in stopping the administration, or at least stopping the developers who want to build a new soccer stadium. This happens not to be in Brooklyn, but in Queens. They want to take the park that I grew up in. Don't hold it against me that I'm not a native Brooklynite, okay? I've been a Queens person. I'm a native person from Taiwan, actually. I was made in Taiwan, as they say. But I grew up in Queens, grew up in Flushing Meadow Park, and that is a park that is really sacred for generations of immigrants who have come through. And they have expropriated more and more of that park space in recent years, and now there was this proposal to use a lot of that land to build a new soccer stadium. I'm all for a soccer stadium, but they got to find their own land. They should not be taking our park space, because once you give up park space, once you give up public land, you never get it back. It's a one-way street. And so I am very, very much in tune with some of the problems, especially with the Brooklyn libraries. Michael and Carolyn have been on top of me for many, many months now. And look, admittedly, I was very much educated very quickly. My learning curve was very quick and steep, but I'm there, and I'm here to join all of you in defending our public libraries. I'll do whatever I can as controller to stop these deals from going forward. And as mayor, I'm going to be a mayor for the libraries, because you know what? I myself grew up in the public libraries. It was my after-school program. I didn't have any other after-school program except my public library. and that was the branch in Flushing, Queens. My son, Joey, he's now 12 years old. He spends a lot of time at the libraries as well. He's now old enough we let him go on his own. And, these are resources. These are resources. I've got a plan as part of my people's budget proposal to have 7-day service in every library. Every 7-day service that will be baselined and not subject to this ridiculous budget dance every single year where, it's just such a farce and a waste of time. We need to stabilize the budget situation. And here again, there's plenty of wealth in this city. It's just a matter of how we allocate it. It's actually a $71.5 billion budget that we have now. And yet, we have to nickel and dime the people who go to the libraries every single year because of this budget dance. It's silly. It's really silly. So what I want to do is I want to get elected mayor. And, these poll numbers out there, don't believe everything you read because they do not reflect, they certainly miss the bulk of my base, which is a largely immigrant base full of non-English speakers. So the folks from Quinnipiac, when they call, they have no idea what they're talking about. But nonetheless, they're coming out to vote, if you know what I'm saying. So with that, I don't know how much more of the 8 minutes I have, but maybe I'll give a little bit more room for the questions. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I want to thank all of you because it's not easy going after this administration. I've done it ever since I took office as comptroller, and I did it before when I was a member of the city council. And when you go after the Bloomberg administration, boy, they come after you, no question about it. But we got to hold firm, and this is a fight that we can win. Thank you so much.
The Committee to Save the New York Public Library would like to know about how it was that Quinn authorized the release of $150 million of taxpayer money for major changes for the Central Library Plan under one of the most celebrated city-owned buildings without any public review or procedures. How would you address that?
Okay, that seems that seems a question more aptly asked of Chris Quinn. Hope she shows up this morning. I don't know exactly what their process was. I imagine, and I don't know for sure, I imagine that it was part of the capital. Was it part of the capital budget?
It was authorized without a hearing, and yes, it was part of the capital budget.
Okay, so that was part of the capital budget. They technically have budget hearings, and I was a member of the city council for the 8 years before I became city controller in 2010. The capital budget process is one where I don't think they do have a hearing for every line item in the capital budget, but $150 million is a significant amount, so it seems like there should have been greater public review. At the end of the budget process, there is an opportunity for the public to testify, although sometimes they drag things out so long so that by the time the public gets to testify, they've been waiting for hours on end, and sometimes they can't stick around for the entire period. So the process does need to be improved in terms of how the public can get more of their opinions into the budget process. But also the $150 million, and I don't remember every line in the capital budget off the top of my head, but I imagine that you said that it was used to move the books.
Part of the Central Library Plan.
Right.
To help.
Yeah, I don't know the details of that particular line item budget, but I'd be happy to take a look at it. And to the extent that my office can look for things because at the end of the day, I still have to sign the checks. So that's what we do at the end of the process to make sure that whatever contracts, and every expenditure is accompanied by a contract. We don't pay anything without a contract. In this case, it would be with the New York Public Library. That's something that I would scrutinize very carefully.
And along the same lines, what about these public-private partnerships, such as between New York City and the New York Public Library, where suspension of ordinary rules requiring competitive bids, selling libraries below market value, without public input, without public hearings, excluding union and minority participation and public scrutiny? What do you propose to do as a mayor to reform the public-private partnership? approach?
Well, I do think that there's room for these P3s, as they're known, public-private partnerships. But my P3s would be very different than the P3s we've seen under this administration. This administration's public-private partnerships are all about private. And the public pays, private gets. That's their definition of partnership. That is not the definition of partnership that I have. I've been very adamant about some of these community benefits agreements, for example. When I first took office as comptroller, I put together a task force that analyzed what some of the shortcomings were with regard to these community benefits agreements. Atlantic Yards was one of the things that we looked at. We looked at Columbia University. We looked at some of these so-called partnerships throughout the city, and just found that in too many cases, there was no mechanism to guarantee that the public end of the deal would actually be met. See, the problem with these kinds of deals is the private gets much earlier up front, whether it be funding or abatements or rezonings. And then it's almost like left to good faith that the developer or the private entity will fulfill their end of the public agreement. And it just has not worked in too many cases. So under my administration, we will have a mechanism to ensure that the public gets our side of the deal.
Thank you. About the waiver, under Bloomberg, he's making efforts to sign a waiver so that there would no longer have to be school librarians. So not only are we seeing libraries disappear, librarians disappear, there are librarians being replaced by clerical staff that don't have to have an MLS degree, and now we're finding that it's affecting the schools as well, where the schools is making an effort to not require school librarians. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, my thoughts are, in general, I'm not looking for waivers. This is an administration that is very fond of waivers because they don't think that the rules apply to them. And whether it be waivers for librarians in schools, I mean, that's something that I'm not looking to cut. Look, we've got to expand our services in our public schools, not diminish them. And libraries and health services and all the ancillary services that we should be expanding within these school buildings. That's something that I've called for a long time. Community centers based around the school, where the school building is open much earlier in the day and is open until much later at night. And the librarians in the schools, as well as other kinds of professionals, that's something that I'm looking to see more of. And it is also part of my people's budget proposals. So I'm not just making these proposals without some revenue, without the revenue side of things. But in general, this is an administration that has sought waivers for a lot of these. Waivers for this, they don't think that the school's chancellor needs an educational background, so they seek waivers for all three of the chancellor appointees under Mayor Bloomberg. They seek waivers, waivers from some public community review requirements when they close streets, like they closed Broadway, and it was great for the big corporations on the avenues. It was horrific for the small businesses on the side streets. It was kind of a waiver. They bypassed local law by calling it a test or a pilot program that then became permanent, and thus bypassing much of the community review. So, and then of course the mother of all waivers, the term limit extension, where the guy got an extra 4 years that he never should have gotten. That was a huge subversion of democracy. So, look, under my administration, I'm looking to follow the rules and to make sure that the community is heard, because in many ways, in many instances, the rules were put in place so that you would not have a city hall that steps over entire communities.
Question, where can we see the people's proposal?
The People's Budget is at peoplesbudgetnyc.com. peoplesbudgetnyc.com. Obviously, no apostrophe.
And I know that was a survey that went out, and what was the number one favored priority of New Yorkers?
Excuse me, strict
we'll
timekeeping
wrap
here.
it up.
Correct, we are up on time.
Okay.
I thank you very much.
Okay, very quickly, peoplesbudgetnyc.com. We also crowdsourced it, which meant that it was essentially a virtual public forum stretched out over several weeks. And we got something like 100, close to 150 proposals from the general public. And the most favorite proposal, actually, I don't remember what the absolute top one was. I remember the top two were adult literacy and expansion of library hours. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.